Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's learning session organized by World Wildlife Fund's Forest and Climate Initiative. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. My name is Breen Burns, and I'm the Program Officer for Learning and Communications. Our presenter today is Maria Jose Pacha, Learning and Knowledge Sharing Manager for the Forest and Climate Initiative. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips and reminders. Today's presentation is being recorded, and you can access the recording within a few days on our YouTube channel. To find the recording, simply go to youtube.com and search for WWF Forest and Climate Initiative, or go to panta.org/forestclimate and look for the REDD plus learning section. There are two audio options. You can listen via your computer speakers or dial in through the number that was provided in your registration email. It's important to note that if you experience audio difficulties while listening through your computer speakers, this can be caused by having multiple software applications open. So please feel free to close some of them, or you can always join via phone. Questions are absolutely welcome. Please type your questions into the question area in the GoToWebinar panel. Maria and I will answer as many questions as time allows during the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you're having any technical difficulties, please submit them to me via the chat area on your GoToWebinar panel if possible. Thanks again for joining us, and with that, I will turn it over to Maria.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are in the world. Thank you for joining this webinar. We are very excited with Breen to present this today. And the session overview gives bullet points of what we are going to cover today. So first, we want to start reflecting why learning is important in the REDD context. Secondly, which is the method that we are proposing for influencing the way we can identify, collect, and gather lessons learned and best practices on REDD. Also, thirdly, we're going to talk about what is a best practice in our context. We will invite you to retrace the path of a practice to understand more the different components. And also then we are going to guide you through the new concept that we want to put forward to all of you of what is an inspiring practice and why are we taking this approach. And finally, we want to promote and tell you about two interesting learning tools. One is a guide, and the other one is the REDD community portal that Breen is going to guide us about. So thank you very much for being here. Next, please. So as you can see from this slide, we want to briefly introduce you to which is our vision for REDD. And WWF is working on REDD specifically to make a contribution to the conservation of tropical forests and thereby to the reduction of emissions from deforestation and degradation for the benefit of people and nature. And also we believe that REDD mechanism must be part of a global climate solution. So we invite you to explore more our work in our website. Next, please. So first we want to emphasize why REDD is important. So we know that as REDD continues to develop, so does the capacity of REDD practitioners. So every day, experts are exploring new ways to define REDD readiness and implementation throughout the project and program work. So actually, we are learning while doing. For this reason, I consider that it is crucial that lessons learned about what works and does not work are captured, shared, and used to inform other REDD efforts, whether at the local project level or global policy level. So while by doing this, learning also is helping to minimize redundancy around the world and maximizing our effectiveness and achievements on REDD. So what is also a big problem is that knowledge is often stored in technical reports and does not reach potential beneficiaries. So it can be challenging to identify, collect, and share information on REDD processes. And these responsibilities often fall to project managers that we know we are all overloaded and do not have a lot of time to reflect on our work. As a result of this, all the information that we are gathering from the project implementation goes only to technical reports, and we can share it with our colleagues around us, but we are missing a big opportunity here. So we believe that project managers and others working on REDD need to effectively reflect on their work. And it's necessary to develop the skills to identify which lessons learned provide innovative and strategic REDD solutions, and to have the ability to share this with others. So here I want to highlight these points as we consider that learning is it's a cornerstone and it's key to move forward for implementing REDD globally. Next, please. So I'm sure that you're going to identify yourself with one of these questions. So how do you define a best practice in REDD? What are the most significant lessons that your team has learned? How can you share lessons with others, and others can benefit from the lessons from that you have learned? How can you assist your team reflect on its work? What aspects of the project are most relevant and important to share with others? And how can you report to donors on key achievements and impacts? So here you can see that the need for reflecting on our work and on implementing REDD are multiple. So they can be from an internal perspective, from a team perspective, and also from a donor perspective. So it has a lot of impact that we understand that we need to acquire the skills to reflect on our work. Next, please. So what I'm proposing is a method for doing this. And the method is called Systematization of Experiences. And this method is to gather and analyze experiences and identify lessons learned. So what is this approach? Well, it helps to deeply and critically interpret experiences and places equal importance to both the process of getting that experience and also the result of that. And we are developing new knowledge. So it will help us answer the question, what worked and did not work? What are the key factors for success? What could have been different and why? And it also considers the difficulty teams may have to interpret experiences in a critical way. So this method that I'm presenting to you has two components. One of them is learning component, and the other one is about knowledge sharing. So the learning component focuses on the process you've been through. It comes from people interest. People is the focus of this process. Encourages reflection on practices and drives the discovery of new knowledge. As I mentioned before, knowledge sharing is also key here, and we need to encourage a participatory process, different dialogue about with different stakeholders, and considers diverse knowledge and ways of learning, and facilitate the development of useful and clear messages for broad audiences. So if you look at the steps of this model, we have 5 steps. The first one is about the identification of what is important to share. So here, REDD practices and experience are recognized and considered inspiring based on a defined set of criteria. And to define, for first identify our practices, we need to be strategical and to refer to our current work strategy and how collecting the practice will influence the work that we are doing. The second step is the registration. So the people that participated in the practice needs to sit down together, gather the data, and produce information that can be systematized and can be also useful for the third step. That it's about reflection on lessons learned. So those involved in the development of a practice collectively share their ideas and review what they have learned. The fourth step is about sharing. So information and knowledge from successful practices are shared and inspire stakeholders to replicate those practices. And the fifth one is about communication. So if we are spending a lot of time on identifying, registering, reflecting, sharing, and if we don't communicate our work successfully, we're missing the point of influencing REDD practices elsewhere. So, and we can start that process again. So we need to be aware that the task of gathering, analyzing, and applying experiences and lessons learned should be a part of all REDD project plans in addition to monitoring and evaluation. This approach differs from monitoring and evaluation because it provides insight to qualitative aspects of the work that we are carrying out, which is difficult to measure and can be often be identified collectively, and it can be applied to any point of the project cycle. The method about learning and knowledge sharing is particularly useful for several reasons. One, it can help us refine frameworks and working hypotheses for scaling up a REDD pilot project or intervention. It can also help us to improve the visibility of successful REDD initiatives or projects. It can help improve or adjust ongoing REDD projects or initiatives, and also the facilitate of transfer of REDD models, experiences, lessons learned, etc. So it has a lot of potential, and here we're going to explore it more in depth. So next, please. So before we explore the method more in depth, we need to be able to identify these key terms. So what is the difference between a project, an experience, and a practice and a best practice for us? So starting with a project, they are organized tasks designed to achieve a particular aim. They are often carried out collaboratively. So you always have a situational analysis, a diagnosis, expected changes or goals, way of achieving results, that can be strategies and resources, and a way of measuring them if you have a kind of monitoring or evaluation criteria. So REDD projects share common components. Each is usually focused on a specific geographical area or issue, brings together individuals and groups, has a clear purpose, faces challenges, and achieves results. Project implementation does not happen linearly, and we know that from our experience, right? With a succession of events occurring as planned. Rather, new and unknown facts arise as a result of interaction among stakeholders. So what is the difference between a project and an experience? An individual can acquire experience in a particular area after working on a field over time. This type of experience is defined in a general way. For example, one can be very experienced on topics related to REDD, like indigenous communities, after spending some time working with local groups. After clarifying these two terms, I think that we are looking more into what is a practice. And a practice is limited to a particular event on a specific chronological and spatial scale. We will see that it has a context, stakeholders, goals, challenges, and achievements. An example of a practice could be, for instance, the development of a cross-sector dialogue REDD roundtable, or the process behind the design, formulation, and application of a forest law, etc. So inside our project, we can have different practices, as we will see. But what is a best practice? Everybody talks about a best practice. And a practice, there are successful experiences that meet certain criteria and bring about lessons learned and recommendations. What happened is that we are using this concept over and over again, what is a best practice, but sometimes not all practices are best. Yes, so we need to define what is the criteria that will make a practice a best practice for us. Next slide, please. So here I want you to understand what is the difference between a practice and a project more in detail. So for instance, I'm giving you an example. We are working on a project called REDD for People and Nature. It's a big project. It has 3 countries in it, and it has 3 goals as well, as you can see from the slide. More or less, we have 40 people working on it. So what is a practice? All the different circles are different practices. So for instance, practices can be about social issues like practice 2 and 4. So in the practice number 2 in blue, it's about the implementation of a roundtable on indigenous people and local communities. However, in country 1, the practice could be about social issues, but could be different. For instance, working on securing land tenure. On the other hand, another example could be on practice 1 on MRV, where in country number 3 they are working on developing a participative deforestation carbon baseline, while in country 2 they are working on MRV, but it's more about community land use plans. Similarly, you can have an example about policy, where in practice number 6 in country 2 they are working on establishing a national REDD framework, but also apart from the different countries at the international level, practice 7 is working more on influencing international policy. So here, as an example, you can see that we can identify the pearls of our work that are those practices. And each of these practices has a story to tell, has different stakeholders, has a different context, and they can all add up to this REDD universe. So it would be interesting if you can identify as part of your work what is your different practices, because also the other challenge is that one person can be in charge of implementing a REDD project and falls into one person different practices. So you can be a country manager, for instance, trying to promote REDD policy at the national level, but also you are managing a sub-regional component working on a project, on a province or a district, trying to make a difference at that level as well. So next slide, please. So after understanding what is the difference and identifying a practice better, what is the best practice for REDD? Something that is interesting is that after you define a practice, depending on the organization you're working and what is your aim, you have to define which is the criteria for to define a best practice for you. So different organizations have different criteria to define their own best practice. And for example, the Food and Agriculture Organization outlines their own criteria for selection of a best practice that are related with environment, with social issues, with technical issues, and economic issues. Also, UNESCO and other organizations have their own criteria. So what we are proposing here is that our criteria for defining a best practice for REDD is to follow the 5 guiding principles that have been identified and defined by WWF together with Greenpeace and CARE on what are the minimum key components that a REDD project needs to have to be successful or to make a difference. So the first of these guiding principles is related with climate, where a REDD project demonstrably contributes to greenhouse emission reductions with national goals working towards the global objective. So for instance, a project that is working at the influencing the national policy level so they can build the frameworks and laws to decrease the carbon emissions would mean that it is following this principle. The second principle is about biodiversity. So the REDD project that maintains or enhances forest biodiversity and ecosystem services is following this criteria. For instance, if you're working on establishing a protected area system, or if you're trying to define protection for key species, you're following this criteria. The third one is about livelihood. So any project that contributes to a sustainable and equitable development by addressing the causes of deforestation and forest degradation also is following these criteria. So if your project, for instance, is working and trying to promote livelihoods to local communities, forest communities, and alternative ways of income, it's also a good example. The fourth one is about rights. So if your project recognizes and respects the rights of indigenous people and local communities, you are following these criteria as well. So if you are helping, for instance, indigenous groups to set a round table to speak with the national government about REDD issues and make sure that they are following free, prior and informed consent criteria, land tenure, etc., you are working towards the goal. And finally, if your project is working towards providing finance for REDD, like mobilizing resources in a way that is equitable, transparent, participatory, and coordinated. So for us, a best practice is REDD is one project that follows all or some of these guiding principles. And you can find more information about them in our website. So next, please. So next, please. We're going to come back to this one after I explain a little bit more what is for us an inspiring practice. So from the concept of what is a best practice for us, I want to propose this new concept that is called inspiring practice. So the concept of best practice refers to successful experiences that met certain criteria and bring about lessons learned and recommendations that might be applied in other contexts. But what happens that in the field of REDD, where international mechanisms are not yet clearly defined, many REDD practitioners are learning by doing. And due to this, it is important to take all practices into account because we learn from those that are successful as well as those that are not successful. For this reason, in the REDD context, the concept of an inspiring practice is more appropriate than a best practice, as it encourages us to learn from both what has worked and what has not, and we explore new ways to reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. So the inspiring practices then become a mechanism through which we can share knowledge through the throughout the REDD community. And we are looking at this word inspirational because it helps us to inspire others' work and to have an impact. But for starting looking at inspirational practice, we need to look back to a process that we want to call it collective knowledge building. So we need to learn by identifying and sharing experience with others. It's not something that we can do on our own sitting on a desk. So can we go back, please, to the previous slide? Thank you. So now we need to retrace the path. So after understanding what is an inspiring practice, how we identify, collect, and share our practice. So we are going to start with an initial situation. Then we're going to go through an intervention process and what is the current situation. So we're going to explore from the beginning what we did. But first we need to identify where can we find an inspiring practice and who can give us information about them. Usually you're going to find these answers to this question by talking to people and looking at different documents. We have to understand that the wealth of our work is in ourselves, the REDD practitioners. Also, our partners and communities have information and knowledge gathered through their own experience. However, this knowledge does not usually transcend local boundaries. A key point that I want to emphasize here is that individuals are the key. So gathering stakeholder opinions of practices is fundamental to build a complete account of events, especially in regard to achievements and challenges. And practices often have diverse group of stakeholders, enabling a rich diversity of information and views about any practice. So when we are going to start once we identify that, for instance, we want to explore how a roundtable on the needs of indigenous people and local communities was developed, we have to start with the initial situation. So we need to go back to the starting point. We need to review the problem that originated the intervention and propose steps to reverse it. And here I put like the context and which was the original challenge. Once we have that clear, we go through the second part, that is the intervention process. In the intervention process, you need to review all the experience components. Who participated, that we call them stakeholders. And in stakeholders, you can have direct stakeholders, indirect stakeholders, strategic stakeholders. The history of that practice, the timing, the different scenarios, where happened what, and how it was carried out, and which were their strategies and activities. So this is a reconstruction of a practice history by remembering or reviewing documentation to pinpoint the most relevant activities carried out. One is of the essential premises of registering and collecting inspiring practices is the ability to visualize them as a process or a path rather than extend from the initial idea of the project end or present time if the practice is still ongoing. So we are going to have an historical perspective that is going to be very useful when we need to reflect on what have we achieved. Then we have finally the current situation. So we need to analyze the current situation by using it as a reference point and comparing it to the initial situation. We can emphasize achievement, beneficiaries, tangible and intangible results, as well as pending difficulties and challenges. And then when we understood from the initial situation what happened and where are we now, this process of reflection, and this process is a group reflection, we are in a good situation where we can together draft the lessons learned. So please, the next slide. Next one, please. So for reflection on lessons learned, these are the pearls of our practice, and it's essential we can share this with others. The practice is something that happened on a specific context and cannot be replicated somewhere else, because the context, the political, social, environmental context are unique, and the stakeholders are unique, and so on. So we are not buying into the idea that we can use the practices as a recipe, but what we can share with others and what we can help others in their REDD practice is the lessons that we've learned from our experience. So we need to have this important concept in mind. Lessons learned reflect the learning that are coming from the experience. Therefore, they suggest how and why different strategies work in diverse situations. So the findings that arise during the project become new knowledge about the context, the method, problems, and people involved. And when we express these changes in a clear and accurate way, we are building lessons learned and generalization that can serve others if they are in similar situations. Lessons are not only best practice or successful experiences. So this means that reflection upon failures is key, not only important, but key, as it allows to change our course of action, and also from challenges we are becoming more innovative in ways that we can overcome the problems that we have experienced. And lessons learned is the result of a process that involves group reflection through a qualitative review of experiences. So we see sometimes that some organizations press for time, hire a consultant to interview practitioners and develop lessons learned. We think that while the external view is important when interpreting experiences, it should not replace lessons learned through a participatory group process with stakeholders. And when you engage everybody in that being implementing the practice on reflecting about what they've learned, this is a very empowering process, and it brings a lot of ownership. So if we want to define what is a lesson learned, they are conclusions that are drawn from the assessment of work, and they are recommendations that serve those who want to develop a similar project. And here we have an example of how we are proposing to phrase a lesson learned. So please, the next slide. So this is a real example of a lesson learned that, that a team working in Brazil, in the Acre state, put together in a workshop that we promoted last year. So what we're saying is that a lesson learned needs to have a general statement that can be applicable to any different context around the world. So here they say inviting is not enough, it is necessary to prepare for participation. And on their experience, this is what they've learned after reflecting on the different phases of their practice. And then in the second part of your practice, you need to explain the lesson in the context of your work. So here they're talking about the importance of public consultation must not be conducted as a mere formality. To conduct a participatory and high-quality consultation process, it is crucial to organize preliminary meetings, etc. So you can see that in the explanatory paragraph, they are linking back the general statement back to their practice and also giving recommendations to others. Thank you. The next slide, please. So sharing and communicating, we know that it's key once we have collected the project and practices. What happened? Around the world, we are generating many new lessons learned, but many of these lessons are not being collected or disseminated in ways that enables others to benefit from this knowledge. So an effective knowledge management system can help to make information easily available to those who can use it to do it better and transfer the practice. So at the moment, we have access to information as ever before through the internet and different ways. But we need to find ways in which we can share what we are learning with others. So here, by talking to others, by having a workshop discussion, or by having concrete communication materials as we are I'm showing in that slide, that's different way is that we can get people's and social groups experiences, and we can share and exchange through different type of interactions. So the more that the knowledge is shared, the more we are growing as practitioners and can have influence on REDD. So don't forget about this step, because sometimes all the work that we do gets stored in different technical report or within our organization, but we need to find ways on sharing what we are learning as we go. So next, please. So all the process that I've been describing so far, you can find more information and more in-depth sections in this learning guide and toolkit that has been published recently, From the Tree of Practices to the Forest of Knowledge, a guide to identify, capture, share, and communicate REDD-inspiring practices. And here the title in a way reflects that if we continue working in isolation, we are like trees where we have a lot of practices, but we need to become a forest and be sure to share that knowledge with others and make an impact on REDD. So this guide it has two parts. One part outlines the model that I shared with you and different steps and ideas and examples how to identify, collect, organize, and share REDD practices. And the part two is a toolbox where we have 15 tools that we are sharing with you that can be helpful in the different steps that I mentioned before, and you can use them for enhancing reflection purposes within your teams, within your project, with stakeholders, and we hope that it can be useful for your work as well. They are available as a digital in a digital format in the links that were provided there. So thank you for this, and now I give the floor to Green, that will tell you more about REDD community.
Thanks, Maria. So now that we've gone over the importance of REDD learning, I'm going to take a few minutes here to walk us through a great new resource for REDD practitioners around the world. It's called reddcommunity.org. REDD Community was launched earlier this month as an open online learning platform for people working on REDD. It's free to join, and registered members have access to numerous resources. Members can connect with others working on the same topic, join or start a community of practice, share resources like news, events, webinars, or publications. Members can also participate in conversations by posting questions, hot topics, or chiming in on an existing discussion thread. So we know that there are already a number of wonderful REDD resources already out there for you to use. And this community complements those by offering some great ways for practitioners to engage with and learn from each other. Our goal here is to create a place where people can find others, get the information they need, and learn about how to do REDD better. We know that REDD teams are often scattered around the world, so we hope that this online platform helps bring people together in a new way. As I mentioned, reddcommunity.org is free to join, and you don't need to be a member to see the content. However, to be able to post comments, join discussions, or share materials, you do need to sign up, which is free and easy. To date, we have nearly 300 registered members from around the world, including representatives from governments, nonprofits, conservation organizations, independent consultants, and more. Our members reflect wide perspectives, and we're thrilled at how engaged people already are. So we hope that as the community grows, members will continue to engage even more with each other and with the resources on the site. If you're on the site and you click through to a member profile, you'll see information about the person's area of expertise, topics of interest, organization, languages spoken, country, and the member sorting features on the members page makes it easy for you to find others working in similar fields or from a specific country. You can also contact members directly through their profiles to strike up conversations via email if you'd like to go that route. One of the defining features of REDD Community is a concept called communities of practice. So a community of practice is an informal group of people who come together to learn and share on a specific topic. We know that there are people around the world working on MRV, policy, and a variety of other REDD topics. And we built REDD Community as a place for them to come together, share information, solve problems, and learn from each other. And earlier this month when we launched the platform, it was launched with one very active community of practice focusing on MRV, led by Naikoa Aguilar Amustashegi. And we invite people interested in MRV to join that community of practice. And we also invite you, if there's another topic that you're interested in leading or starting a community of practice for, to contact us so we can help you set this up. And these communities of practice are a great way to connect with others that you may not have known were working on similar topics, and a great place for capacity building in a cost-effective way if you can't always meet in person. So the next feature we'll talk about is the share section. And this is another keystone of reddcommunity.org. Members are invited to share REDD news, publications, videos, images, and inspiring practices here. And as more users share content, the library of resources available on REDD Community becomes even richer and more diverse. So if you are a member, we invite you to start sharing. And if you're not a member, we invite you to sign up and start sharing. In addition to the communities of practice, another one of the key features that sets REDD Community apart is the conversations area. In this part of the platform, users can post questions, chime in on discussions, and engage with experts or others working in the same REDD area. Right now, we have two conversation streams, a general REDD conversation stream and an MRV stream for the more focused discussions coming from that community of practice. As more communities of practice come online, each of those will have a dedicated area for their own conversations. As you can see here, the current conversation topics run the gamut. So we've got everything from social safeguards to plotless carbon accounting with LIDAR. So if you have a question you've always been wanting to ask or a REDD topic you'd like to debate, this is the place to come. Maria has already taken us through the methodology behind inspiring practices, but in this section of the platform, you'll find that information and much more on how and why collecting lessons learned is important. So here in the Inspiring Practices section of REDD Community, you'll be able to read our first 3 published inspiring practices that the WWF team has produced. However, we don't want this to be a library of WWF inspiring practices, so we also invite members of the community and other organizations to share their experiences with us. And we're currently working to guide a few of them through the process of thinking about and capturing lessons learned. So in the coming months, watch this space. We hope to have additional inspiring practices from diverse organizations here that can help you and others learn from REDD projects happening around the world. And finally, at the far right of your navigation bar on reddcommunity.org, you'll find the resources section, which is where you can access all of the news, publications, videos, a glossary, and the other content that we discussed earlier. This is also a great place to do a more advanced search. If you click through to the resources section, you'll find some additional search and filter tools on the right-hand side of the page. So that is the brief run through of reddcommunity.org. So with that, I hope that those of you who are already members are exploring and sharing content, and I hope that those of you who haven't yet joined will go ahead and sign up. And we also welcome your feedback and input. So we want this to be a useful resource for everybody. Please visit the platform, use it, start a discussion, share something, and then let us know what you think. So thank you. With that, I will open it up for questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Bryn. And if you have any specific question, please, you have a special area in the webinar section. And we have Rob that has asked 2 interesting questions. So I give you the floor to Rob so he can ask his questions.
Hi there. Thank you very much, Maria, for that. It was really interesting. And I guess my questions were about the, on the slide where you talked about practices being embedded within projects, it seemed like for the different practices that you outlined, they were really linked to subject areas. They were sort of topics or policy issues. And so I was wondering if on an even more kind of fundamental level, is there a way to pull out even more detailed way the difference between a practice and a policy specialization, let's say? Because I've noticed in some of my discussions with WWF colleagues, people are really, really kind of experts in their area. They're probably global experts in certain topics, but that expertise seems to me different than the practice that goes along with implementing that expertise. So I was just wondering if there's anything that is sort of going further down that road, where would that take us, or is that really going beyond the scope of what you're talking about? Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you, Rob, for a very interesting and challenging questions. Yeah, as you mentioned, people can be expert on a topic, and they're getting this knowledge and skills by doing something for a long time and being very much aware of all the most significant changes in the area, and that is what we are calling here experiences or expertise. That's different from a practice. So the practice is a particular event or the implementation of a particular aspect of an overall project, maybe, that has the component that I mentioned before. It has a context, stakeholders, goals, challenges, and achievements, amongst others. And they come from the on-the-ground implementation of a particular aspect of our REDD work. And what you're asking has been one of the most challenges things to define somehow, because there is a lot of confusion with these terms. People sometimes call it what is a best practice, and they confuse it with a recommendation. And here we want to make an emphasis that the practice is the overall story behind the implementation of a particular aspect of our work. And from that we can get recommendations and lessons learned. So I don't know if I'm answering your question or if there is any.
No, that's helpful. Yeah, I think you're getting at what I was. I think it is confusing, and I think I could see the struggle. But I'm really glad we're having this conversation. So and we'll keep it going next week. So thank you.
Yeah, and also have a look at the section on inspiring practice on redcommunity.org, where you can have examples of what we are calling a practice and the different components, and you will see that we have to look at it as the story behind of what we are doing in our work. Okay, well, thank you, Rob. Any other question?
Muted.
Okay, I think that we don't have any more questions, or everybody understood, or everybody's confused. So I would like to choose the second one.
So Maria, this is Breen, and
so, Breen, any other comment? Yeah.
Sure. I was going to say, in your experience working on learning, what do you think is the biggest challenges for teams who are working to collect lessons learned, or what have you seen as the biggest stumbling block?
Well, the biggest challenge is that depending on the organization, sometimes people don't dedicate enough time to learning and this type of reflection processes. There can be issues at the organization level that there are not the space for learning, and I think that we are very lucky in the First and Climate Initiative that we are spending some resources on this. But people have the impression that they don't have time to learn, that this is sometimes not useful, and if we have a very focused project mind, so we need to focus on the project that we're working on, looking at the results that we need to achieve, and that's the main, our main concern. Well, actually, when we spend some time with our teams reflecting on the different processes behind the practice, we can learn much more and tune our efforts more.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. So I see that we have another question from Jolly.
Carla.
Or Carla.
It's Jolly, yes. I will give the floor to Jolly. Jolly from DRC.
Hello.
Hello, Jolly. Hi.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm okay. Okay. I'm okay. We need also to apologize because we are late. Carla and I. We just left the Peru embassy at Pretoria for our visa. We are now in South Africa.
Wow.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Okay. Okay. I noticed that we must have a lesson learned for best or bad experiences. Are we obliged to report a bad experiences also?
No. You need to concentrate also. The lesson learned come after when you've been reflecting on your work,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the process, you will have identify which are the achievements, the challenges, and then you will be able to, with your team, ask yourself, okay, what have we learned from this process? What have we learned from the achievement? What have we learned from the challenges? Because sometimes teams find a way of overcoming difficulties in a very innovative way, and that's very interesting to know with others and to share with others.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And where's the link between best practice and lesson learned?
Okay, so the best practice is what we want to call here inspiring practices, as I mentioned before. So because we can all learn from good and bad experiences, and we need to look back from the initial situation of our work and then look what happened through the intervention process and the current situation. So the practice is looking since you started and analyzing different components. And then afterwards you analyzed all them, you can sit together with your team and understand what you've been learning through the implementation of that. So we have to reframe our mind, thinking that the lesson learned is like a recommendation that we want to give to others of what we have learned in our work.
Okay. Okay. Can I have your application?
Yes. Hello, Maya.
Hello.
Hi. Yes. My question is about REDD member community. We try to register to be the member of me and Julie and Chloe, but there is no, I don't find our name and I don't know our picture and our name in this registration.
Okay, don't worry. If you have
how
problems,
can I do?
If you
Yes,
have problems, yeah, we can connect that, and Green and myself can help you on that. Apart from the webinar, I think that we can communicate by email, and we can guide you through this.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for joining.
Yes, Julie is there.
Hello.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Well, thank you, Carla and Jolie, for joining us. We can continue by email. So, is there any other question? Okay, we have Minnie that also has an interesting question she wants to ask. The floor is yours, Minnie.
Oh, but I didn't really want to make a comment, a question. It's really just a comment that, for people who are on the field, all of this, reflection, getting the lessons are done on a daily basis. And I think what is the stumbling block often is that the documentation, so that it can be shared on a broader basis. So I think that for many of the field practitioners, the lessons learned are all in their heads. So there's this body of knowledge that is retained in their heads, but I think the stumbling block is in the sharing, and how do they document this. So perhaps that can also be one of the things that can be explored further, is the creative ways of documenting, and not just writing and maybe videotaping and all of this, so that it doesn't appear like it's an added burden of writing down this lesson. So yeah, that's just my comment.
Well, thank you. I think that your comment is very well placed, and it depends very much where you're working and what is the people, the team. So in our case, if we are focusing on REDD practitioners, we are making the assumption that people have access to internet, to a computer, to a printing material if we are publishing something. But obviously, if you're working at the field level and with local communities and indigenous people, you have to find other ways that are more adequate for documenting and sharing. So it could be maybe a video, a radio program, a manual. So that very much depends on which is the stakeholders, your partners working at a different level. And also we propose, for instance, in one of the tools in the guide is to have a social documentary video where people can film each other, and you can have a joint material that you can share with others. But yes, you are right, Minnie, and thank you for your comment. Well, okay, I think that there are no more questions.
So, Maria, actually, it looks like...
Anything else that you want to add before we...
Yes, we do have a question.
Andrea.
Yeah, do you want to turn the floor over there?
Yes, I give the floor to Andrea Camacho. Andrea is from Colombia. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Very clear.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I have a question. I've been working in this safeguard system for Colombia for a while now, but then talking about lessons learned, then you start saying, okay, many times when I write down my lessons learned, I wait until the end of the process and I know what went right and what went wrong, and then you are able to like have your lessons learned and share them. But then that can take some time before we get to those lessons learned. But in the process, you have different lessons learned. Is there a way to have, I mean, to guarantee that we are sharing lessons learned like on the go, on the way, during the time that we are like formulating and living the process without making it like another extra burden? I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear.
No, that's fine. I think that what we need to, my suggestion would be that we don't see this as an extra burden, but as an essential and needed space. Because from once, if you dedicate some time to these reflection processes with the stakeholders and the partners you're working with, I don't know, it may be every 6 months or every year, that will help you also to redirect your work if it's needed and to address different challenges as they come. So the proposal here, and I know that this is difficult because it implies maybe more time or more resources, is to try to incorporate this type of thinking and methodology more into the implementation of our work, and not only at the end, as you mentioned, and to make it a living process. And you can document it in several ways, as you can see in the tools that we are proposing in the guide, and we are going to explore that in depth more next week. I'm sure that you're going to be there. So hopefully you can have a better insight of what it implies.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So Maria, it also looks like Albert has his hand raised.
Yes, I will give the floor to Albert. Albert, hello Albert.
Hi, how are you?
We can hear you. Do you have any question or comment?
I have a comment, and my comment is that I joined the discussion with Vincent. We are from West Africa, Solidaridad, West Africa.
Yes.
So we joined the discussion using one laptop. But I have a question, and that has to do with the best practices for REDD. You know, you mentioned 5 guiding principles, and one has to do with the livelihoods. I want to find out whether if your livelihood program does not directly contribute to deforestation, and therefore, you know, forest degradation, you don't consider it as a best practice? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, so let me rephrase it again. You're related with the livelihood criteria for defining a best practice, whether if the livelihood is actually influencing negatively and causing deforestation and forest degradation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we are proposing here is that if your project, for instance, you want to address this threat, you have to propose alternative ways for communities to find for meeting their livelihoods and helping them explore different options that won't cause deforestation and forest degradation. So if you are able to achieve this, then your practice, it's important considering that third criteria.
Okay. Vincent has a subsequent question.
Okay, well, thank you, Albert. Yes?
Yes. As a follow-up to that, because we are still learning and we want to do some REDD activities. In that sense, if one proposes alternative ways for them to do or engage in their livelihood activities, what kind of payment mechanisms would you consider as a best practice that has worked in other jurisdictions?
Okay, well, thank you. Well, in that respect, Albert, I think that we are proposing like sub-items, yeah, that we are, and here we have Mini, that is our social safeguards expert, that I can connect you with her so she can guide you more in this like detailed question. But we are trying to promote secure land tenure, free, prior and informed consent, and other items about this specific item. So I think it would be very useful if I can connect Albert with Mini after the webinar so you can understand more the specific of this work.
Okay.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you. So also we have a final participant, Nikki, that there are two questions from Nikki. I will give the floor. So Nikki, if you can introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I guess you already answered my first question, but I was just wondering how you recommend that we can make it easier for our in-country and field practitioners who have slow internet that's unreliable, how to make it easier for them to interact with the online platforms such as the one that WWF has created, and then also how to kind of headquarter colleagues who are more reluctant to share information and to interact with the platforms, kind of what your recommendation is for these two different groups of people.
Okay, well, Nikki, I will try to answer you as brief as possible, and then maybe we can communicate and contact by email. Is that, as you said, how do you recommend that we make it easier for field practitioners and reluctant headquarters colleagues to become good information sharers? I think that why there is an added value by sharing our information and our knowledge is that our work becomes more widely known, and other organizations and people can refer back to our work. This question about putting ourselves out there and sharing with others, it's a good way of trying to influence colleagues to do the same thing. Sometimes it's difficult if your organization doesn't see the added value from sharing the knowledge and building together something that is meaningful to the organization. But it's a slow process as they will see the value of that, it will open gradually. But that you can be a good change agent and convincing agent as well on this. But we are proposing as well other ways apart from internet that maybe you can promote this process within your office and within your organization if you don't have internet connection and still be useful for you. And we can talk about this more in detail if you want by email.
Sure, that's wonderful, thank you. And my second question is just, I guess this is more about monitoring, but if you have a way other than checking the number of hits or searching on Google where your lessons learned documents are posted to see kind of where they're cross-posted, if you have kind of a way of monitoring the results or impacts of the lessons learned, because that's also a nice way to convince colleagues to get involved and to capture the lessons. If we can show them, look, they've been picked up, in different places and in these countries, etc. So just how you know whether they've reached the intended audiences.
Well, you're asking the question, the most challenging question when you are engaging on a learning process. How you're showing that the learning effort is having some impact. Mm-hmm. I think that there are several ways that you can do that, and also we can contact by email. But you can have surveys with the audience that you're intended to reach to see whether they have received the information and whether they are using it for their own purposes and applying the new learning that came from your own experience. But this is one of the most difficult parts in learning. It doesn't mean that we don't need to do it. We must do it to assess our impact. But as I mentioned again, we can you can contact me by email. My email is mpacha, P-A-C-H-A, at wwfint.org. Yeah, so we will contact you after the webinar as well with this detailed information. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think that it's been a very productive session. I want to thank you, want to thank Breen also for presenting REDD Community, and we hope that you can log into it, become a member, and start sharing. See you soon, and thank you, Breen, for your time and your presentation.